I like to talk about money. He did not like to talk about money. Definitely there was some friction in the beginning because that's a long time, to not have freedom of finances, but one of the things you have to be able to do as a couple, especially if you're in business together, but even just as a regular couple, whether you're working together or not, you have to be able to talk about money. And that's something that we have gotten a lot better at. Overall, we both have common goals. One of the biggest goals we set this year was to get out of debt. And so we've been actively working on that together as a couple and separately in our own personal finances. And they're not easy conversations a lot of the time, but they're necessary. And you have to be able to talk about all of the things, whether they're hard conversations or not, or it's not going to work.
Hello and welcome to Married and Magnetic, the place for entrepreneurial couples who want to stay happily married.
In each episode, we have real conversations with ordinary couples doing extraordinary things, sharing achievements, everyday joys, challenges, and the mindset and tools that make love the greatest strategic edge.
We are James
and Angela Mitchell,
a real-life married couple. She's a counselor,
and he's a coach,
parents to 3 kids,
and co-founders of Love Intentionally. We've ridden the highs
and lows
of building businesses while working hard to stay happily married. We've lived it, done the work,
got the t-shirt,
and are here to help you do the same.
This is Married and Magnetic, where love, business, and growth collide. Let's dive in, y'all. What's up, y'all? Welcome to another amazing episode of Married and Magnetic, a Love Intentionally podcast. We are your hosts, James
and Angela.
We're the Mitchells and the co-creators of Love Intentionally, and it is a great day to love intentionally. And if you are a business owner or want to be in navigating transitions and really working to design your life so that work is supporting it and to be more intentional about your marriage, your relationship inside of the life that you're building, this is the show for you. Got some amazing guests on today. We've got Jen and Alex Jaciw, and today we're excited to have a conversation. And because Jen is a career ownership coach and small business consultant who helps professionals and established leaders navigate meaningful transitions with clarity and confidence. A former successful business owner and award-winning professional, she built her first company alongside her husband and best friend, Alex. And after 32 years together, they continue to design life intentionally. Following the sale of their California business, they relocated to New Mexico for a new chapter of freedom and purpose. When she's not guiding clients from leap to launch, Jen can be found hiking desert trails with her camera in hand. And maybe even Alex. Alex, do you join her for those hikes too?
Occasionally.
Occasionally. I follow.
Yeah, there we go.
But
That's
then,
great. That's
with
great.
her
Well,
having
welcome
the
to the show, y'all.
camera,
We're
it's
so
always
excited to
good
have you.
because lots of breaks because she
Yeah,
wants
nice.
Are you in any of the photos?
maybe once in a while.
Mostly nature.
Mostly
Nice. Yeah, great. Awesome. Well, welcome, y'all. It's good to have you. Yeah, so let's dive in. I am curious. You all, I know, built a business together initially. That was early on in your
Yep.
relationship, right? So just a little context here, right? We have couples that we work with, and I know listen to that podcast that have kind of different configurations of entrepreneurship, right? Some are in business together. One is an entrepreneur and the other isn't. Sometimes they're both entrepreneurs in different businesses, right? We have all these different configurations. So you all started doing a business together pretty early on in your marriage. Can you speak to what that was like for you? Maybe why you decided to do a business together, and how did it go working together as a married couple?
It was probably one of the most challenging things that we've ever done before. But also the most rewarding because we were able to figure it out. And I always tell the couples that I work with, if you can figure it out, it's a beautiful thing for your relationship and for your business. If you can work together, any kind of family dynamic, but especially with your partner. So I had been in transportation for a long time, but, we were at the point where he wanted to do it for ourselves versus me working for somebody else. So I worked for somebody else in the transportation industry for 15 years and then, went to my boss and I said, my husband wants to make a go of this and see if we can do it, on our own versus working for somebody else. And she was so supportive and it was great. And she said, you know what, go do it. If it doesn't work out, you can always come back. And so that was so, it was a blessing right from the beginning. But we dated for 10 years before we got married. And so that was 21 years ago or so that we had that first business, and we created Lone Star Limousine in California, Silicon Valley, very competitive industry, but we were known as a white glove service in the Bay Area. And we had, celebrities and C-suite level transportation coordinators reaching out to us. And we had a lot of fun, in that 15 years that we had the business together. But we realized early on, within the first 3 months, that if we didn't find a business coach that could help, be that outside set of eyes on us, it was not going to work. We were going to kill each other. So, and I think you would agree, but we did. We invested in a business coach early on. And that's really when I got to see the value of coaching and consulting. And she right off, helped us with setting boundaries and, really clearly defining our roles in the business, because we had different strengths and weaknesses for sure. And he's always been, the behind the scenes kind of logistics operations guy. And I've been the sales and marketing and administration, managing the staff. And it worked, it was not always easy. Like I said, it was one of the most challenging things that we've ever done together. But at this point, we have done so many things together throughout our 32 years that I think it just brought us closer together. Definitely strengthened our relationship for sure.
Well, and especially when the business is 24/7
Yeah.
and, we're constantly trying to find time for each other and also talk about business while we're spending time together, because we're 24/7 or 24/7. And so it had its challenges.
It did, but we figured it out.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'd love to double click on a couple of the things you said, because I think they're really important and what couples doing business together struggle with a lot, present company included with us when we first started working together. You talked about boundaries. I love that you said you hired a business coach, right? And just the value of that. We talk a lot about how obviously as coaches, we value coaching as well. We have our own marriage counselor that we go to see when we need it. And it is having that outside perspective, right? And the thing James will say a lot is you can't read the label from inside the bottle, right?
Yeah.
And so you can't always see what's going on when you're just so in it, and you need that kind of outside perspective. The other thing I find with coaching is that it matters who says it, right? If he tries to tell me something business-wise, like
super controlling all of a sudden.
I'm like, stop micromanaging me, But if like a business coach says it, I'm like, oh, that's a great idea.
Yeah.
3 years ago, I was like, "Hey, babe, we
don't need to talk
work
about
with
this.
entrepreneur couples. Like, that's our clientele. Like, every single one of our clients, at least one of them's an entrepreneur." And she's like, "No, we don't.
We
work
can
with
help everyone."
everybody." 2 years later, we hired a business coach that was like, "Y'all work with entrepreneurial couples." And Angela's like,
Yeah, that's a great idea.
"It's awesome. You're right. Oh my gosh. Like, I never thought of that before."
So yes, coaching is important. Thanks to Megan, our business coach. But you talked about that coach helping you with boundaries and also roles. And I think those are two really important areas. I know we made the mistake of not clearly defining our roles when we started. And what would happen then is sometimes when decisions needed to be made, if we didn't agree on the path forward, it was hard to know whose idea to go with, right? Because because we'd be disagreeing about something business wise, and then I wouldn't like the tone he used with me. So then all of a sudden we're like not good in the relationship either, right? So can you speak to how you all handled any like tips, tools, whatever you learned around boundaries and roles when you were working together?
I think part of it was the whole coaching experience. One of the things that she did with us first, and I do this with my own clients, is some assessment work. We were given a DISC analysis, and that not only brought out our strengths, but also the areas that we are, less effective in. And she used that as a guide, to help us clearly define the roles within the organization. And then, one of the things that I think works to our advantage, one of those nuggets that I think makes us a little bit different, is because we dated for such a long time before we got married, we were friends first. We were actually friends that double dated. The first 2 years of our relationship was actually a friendship. He set me up with his best friend. and I dated his best friend for 2 years. And at the time, his friend wanted to get married right away. I had just come out of a really abusive relationship before I met him. And I wasn't ready for that. I wasn't ready to get married and have kids. And so we ended up going our separate ways. But for 2 years, we double dated, as couples. And I got to know this guy really well. And he was the first male that I had had a really good relationship with in my entire life, and that was really special to me. So there's always been that extra level of respect that I think bled into our business, and having the roles and having the boundaries and just, that helped us not step on each other's toes and really respect, the lines that were drawn. And, because when we didn't, that's when the arguments would happen. It's like you're in my lane now and let's get back to where we're supposed to be so that we can clearly make that next decision or take that next step in the business. And so I think that was really important, a big important piece of it.
Yeah, and also with the business coach, it also taught us about trusting each other's decisions, because I couldn't make all the decisions, she couldn't make all the decisions. So we had to trust that whatever decisions we made was the best decision for not only us, but also for the company and our employees.
And
So,
support each other in
yeah,
that, whatever. And clearly everybody makes mistakes, right? Part of success is failure and learning from those
learning.
failures, and not making the same mistake over and over again. But, trusting that this is the decision we're going to make. And if it doesn't work out, that's okay, but supporting each other in whatever that decision is. And then learning if it didn't work out, learning so that we wouldn't make the same mistake again.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, just the kind of perspective you all had on, I think it can be easy if someone messes up or there's a decision that ends up costing the business money, or whatever, to be kind of like, well, that's not the decision I would make. But then to be able to go like, no, like they're doing the best they can and that's their lane. And so it's their decision. And if it works, awesome. And if it doesn't, we'll figure it out.
Yeah.
That kind of mindset is really helpful.
So when starting a business, it sounded like you had, let's say, like a parachute, right? You can always come back to the other one. But ultimately, you went into a lifestyle where you both were relying on the success of the business to create the income to support your life. Is that correct?
Yep.
And so how much of an on-ramp did you have, in terms of, I don't know if there was cash in the bank or how many months of expenses? What did you have and what do you generally recommend and kind of coach people on when they're starting their business? Here's when you can really start to expect to have some money coming in.
Yeah, and I think it depends on the industry as well, because transportation is a very expensive industry. Every dollar we made for the first 3 years went back into investing in a new piece of equipment or another chauffeur, or and that was just because we were in a luxury service. So that was a little bit different probably than another industry like a home services industry or something where you're seeing money come in and your cash flow positive probably a lot sooner. So we really did buckle down and make the commitment that we were going to make this work. And, there were definitely periods of time where we didn't pay ourselves so that we could pay our employees. And so we did have to have some money in the bank to be able to do that. I always recommend, that you have at least 6 months of working capital when you start a business. If you can have up to 2 years, that's even better. For us, it was about the 3-year mark that we really started to see the cash flow and consistency. And I don't think, that was out of the ordinary for being in a luxury service. That it took a little bit longer to get there. But I think it's smart. You can't just jump into something. A lot of people jump into businesses because they're really good at something, but they don't necessarily understand the business side of things. There'll be a great coach or whatever it is that they decide they're going to do for a business. But if you're not thinking about the business side of things and all the expenses that come with it, you're going to run into some problems at some point, early on. And so we did think about those things. And, but we were also super committed. There were definitely challenges because it is a 24/7 business when you're in transportation, and it didn't leave a lot of time for us to just be couples and do couple things. And we really had to be intentional about that. So I love, that your podcast is called Love Intentionally, because we had to be very intentional about our time and about how we spent our off time. Once we had our, key personnel in place, that's when we could start doing the things that we really love to do. And one of those things is travel, new experiences, new adventures. And so that is a very special thing for us, is to be able to travel several times throughout the year. And we were able to do that with our own business.
Yeah, and it took a little time to do that. It took us a couple years. Didn't help that I'm a workaholic. So, I didn't matter to me if I had to work 7 days a week, 20 hours a day, but we still found time for each other. But once we were able to get to the point of where we had key personnel taking care of the business for us, and that opened up more time for us to do what we wanted to do.
So the classic challenge of we're partners in business and there's not enough time to put on the relationship hat for each other. So you find the time. I'd probably say you probably ended up making the time for each
Yeah.
other,
Oh,
right?
yeah.
More so. You don't find it. But in terms of, right, 3 years before you started to experience and enjoy the financial success of it, how did you talk about money? And maybe which one of you was more likely to want to talk about it?
I like to talk about money. He did not like to talk about money. And, definitely there was some friction in the beginning, because that's a long time, to not have freedom of finances, But one of the things you have to be able to do as a couple, especially if you're in business together, but even just as a regular couple, whether you're working together or not, you have to be able to talk about money. And that's something that we have gotten a lot better at, just overall. We both have common goals. One of the biggest goals we set this year was to get out of debt. And so we've been actively working on that together as a couple and separately in our own personal finances. And they're not easy conversations a lot of the time, but they're necessary. And you have to be able to talk about all of the things, whether they're hard conversations or not, or it's not going to work.
Agreed.
So how do you actually do it? Right. When you're ready to talk about money, he doesn't want to talk about money, but we need to talk about money. Like what is the way
Well,
that you've
he's much more open to it now, I think, because we went through so many ups and downs throughout our decades together. He's much more open to the conversation, I think. I can bring it up if we need to talk about something. We usually set a big goal, like in 3 weeks, we're going to Bali for the first time. And that's something that we planned a year ago. And I have since been injured. Since, I got injured after that. So I'm still recovering from an injury. So the vacation's not going to be quite what we had envisioned to begin with, but who gets the opportunity to do that? Not a lot of people. And I'm very grateful for that. It's something that we set our minds to a year ago and said, we're going to do this. And so we're doing 2 weeks in Bali and Singapore. And I can't wait, to see that part of the world, and explore some different things. And so,
Yep.
Awesome.
well, all right, Alex. You
Like
didn't
when
let's do this, right? You didn't like talking about money. Why? Like what was underneath that?
we usually find there's something underneath, for couples, they have different values or whatever, right? That get brought
Well,
up when
yeah,
money is.
I grew up. I grew up from a European family, and it was always, work hard and it will show in the end. And when you're running a business, sometimes when you're running a little lean, then it's like, okay, I got to now juggle to find out where I'm going to get all the payroll money or pay for a vehicle that I committed to. So it was always a juggling act needed in the first 3 years in order to keep the business successful. I didn't want to just have a business and let it fail. That's not me. And so that's why I committed to working as many hours as I needed and how many ever days I needed. But the money part of it was it's always it's a challenge for any business, because you are finding new challenges. A car needs a repair, needs a new transmission or whatever. And you may have not budgeted for that at that time, but you got to figure it out. And I mean, we always figured it out, but there were, times it was like, okay, scratch my head and how am I going to get through this?
I think it brought a lot of stress for him. He grew up in a household, an immigrant family that really, like you said, they were both workaholics. The whole family was. And but that was out of necessity when they got here. They had to prove themselves and save for their first home. And so he grew up in that household where that was just second nature to him. But I think when it came to him being responsible for the money, it was really stressful for him. And so I think that's,
Well, and also, when you have employees, the way I look at it is they're an extension of our family. And so I wanted to make sure that all our employees were taken care of. And that was even the case when we sold the business.
Mhm.
We took a little less money to make sure that our employees were going to stay employed by the new company. If the new company was not going to do that for us, then we were going to look at somebody else purchasing our business.
Yeah, that was really important to us.
Yeah. I think that's a area of business that maybe people who haven't had employees before don't always understand, right? Is that we have a couple that we worked with and, she was ready for them to sell the business and he felt it was really hard for him because he felt really responsible for these employees that some of them had worked for him for 20, 30 years.
Right.
And then they had families. He knew their kids and he knew their grandkids and,
Right.
and that there's this, it's great to be the boss in so many ways. And it's also like really hard. There's a lot of extra responsibility, a lot of extra pressure you feel now, not only for the business, but for the people inside it.
Yep.
Yeah.
These are the real aspects when considering wanting to begin your own business, right? Starting your own business. So Jen, you take people through the process of where they are able from leap to launch, right? And clearly you have to leap first. And do you find that a lot of people in that stage of getting ready to leap like have something to prove? And is that the right energy to come at it from, or is there potentially a different, or dare I say, better space to come at this from?
I think, the more curious you can be about something new, the bigger the payoff is going to be when you can actually be successful at it. A lot of people, I deal with a lot of fear, in the coaching program that I provide because people love the idea of being their own boss. But what does that really mean? What comes along with that? Yeah, it's great to have the flexibility of your schedule and more freedom of time. But, do you want employees? Do you not want employees? What is it that we could transfer that skill set? Maybe you've been in the same industry for 20 years and you want to do something completely different, so walking beside somebody through that whole process and talking about what's coming up for you. I don't think it's so much that they want to prove themselves that they can be a business owner. I think those types of people typically go into um, a business where they're kind of buying themselves a job, where it's just them. They want to make a go of it on their own, usually like a solopreneur kind of role. I think what I really enjoy, the people I enjoy working with are the what if. What if I did this instead of that? What would that look like? Let's talk about that. Let's visualize that. What kind of, a lot of my clients have great leadership skills. They've been in some kind of C-suite role for a long time. How can we transfer that into, your own business where you're hiring your own dream team around you, because those are definitely transferable skills and you could do this, with proper support. I want to make sure that, when you're ready to take the leap, that you also have everything you need to have a successful launch. So that includes, tons of support. Nobody can do it on their own. It takes a village, I mean, just in general, whatever business you're going into, I think you should not try to do everything yourself. I also, talk to them about outsourcing, the things that you either don't enjoy, don't want to learn how to do. You're going to spend way more time procrastinating it or, not even doing it than if you were to just pay somebody to take care of it for you. So those are things, part of the conversation as well. I think that more so the people that I work with are just curious. Can I do this? Can I do this on my own versus, waiting for a paycheck from somebody else where you really don't have any control, because people are getting laid off every day and you don't know when that's going to happen. And the higher up you are in the business or the organization, the more likely you are to get cut because they're replacing those people with younger and less expensive personnel. I see that a lot, unfortunately.
So, question then, a lot of these people you're working with, it sounds like wanting to do this shift, right? Like wanting to kind of often pursue their dreams, I would say. With that fair way to put that? And then I'm guessing a lot of them are married or have some significant person in their life. And it can be, when you're doing these things, it can be scary for the partner as well, for the spouse, right? If this person's wanting to take this big leap or launch. So I'm curious from you all, what is helpful, do you think? I know you have personal experience, right, with both of you having been entrepreneurs, together and apart. What can be helpful in a relationship? Like, what are the conversations that should be had? How can the spouse be supportive, or how can the person making the leap help include the spouse? Like, what do you think is important there? Because I think sometimes these big transitions can cause tension in the marriage.
They can, for sure. And that's one of the things that I address in the first call. Inquire if they have a significant other in their life. And if they do, I let them know from the very beginning that that person is welcome to join any of the calls. I think it's really important, especially when somebody starts to get serious about going into business for themselves. We need to make sure that that partner is on the same page, whether they're going to be involved in the business or not. If they're going to be involved in the business, it's even more important that they're part of the conversation. But just being addressed, all of their concerns and questions, making sure that they're addressed is super important. Whether that be a call with me or a call with the business directly, make sure that your partner knows what it is that you're doing, that they're welcome to be part of the conversation. I have them do an exercise together. If they do have a significant other, the goals worksheet that I send to them before our first coaching call, ask them to do that with their partner, because I want that partner to be on, make sure that they're on the same page about what they want for the next 12 months. What does that look like? What does that next year look like? And how involved is that other person going to be or not? I think it's really important. So it's kind of funny how I ended up in this business. I went through this journey with my own coach 5 years ago. And he used to work up in Alaska every fishing season. He managed a fishing lodge up there. So he would be gone for 3 to 4 months every summer. And that just happened to be when I was going through this coaching experience with my coach. And I was like, getting more serious about going into business for myself. And I would talk to him every day, but as it got more serious, he's like, don't do anything till I get back. Because he wanted to be part of the conversation. He wanted to meet my coach and get his questions answered. And I said, absolutely, that should be, something that we do. So as soon as he got back, he took a call with my coach alone, just the two of them, and got his questions answered. And then we did a call together, the three of us. And I think that made a huge difference in his confidence in what I was looking at doing. And I mean, you could speak to that, but I think that it really helped, and I think it's really important that both people are on the same page with something like this.
Yeah, and I guess the advantage was with me being in Alaska, it sort of stretched the whole thing out a little bit. And, it wasn't like a split-second decision. We talked about a lot of different scenarios. We looked at how it was all going to work. She had some other options for businesses, and I gave her my 2 cents on what the pluses and minuses were in those. And so I think that really helped by us being able to communicate, and also by being a little bit apart, so we could sort of take our time and make this decision, because it is a life-changing decision. It's not like, you're just going to go get another job next week. This is a business that she wanted to start and go with. So it's a large investment, but it's worth it.
Yeah. So that's kind of how we started as well, was and the seeds of Love Intentionally even started, was James was an entrepreneur. I was a counselor, but for other people. So I had a W-2. And he was wanting to bring me in on the business goals, right, that he had, and his financial goals. And so we went away for a weekend together. And then me being the counselor was like, well, and we should talk about our feelings and how we communicate and all these things, in addition to the financial. and the business goals. But what we found is that even when it was just his business, he was in real estate at the time, if I knew and understood and felt kind of bought in on the goals, it made things in the relationship go so much smoother. So when he got a call to go show a house or write a contract and it's the evening and we've got toddlers and babies, I'm much more likely to send him out the door with like a, go get him, tiger, than like a resentful eye roll, like, oh, you're leaving again and dinner and bath.
Exactly.
And,
Not just send me out the door, but greet me with open arms when I got back home.
Yeah.
So the
Yeah.
connection stayed strong, stable, resilient.
Because I could understand that his business goals were also what was supporting the lifestyle that we wanted,
Right.
and so
The house she wanted.
if those things were a shared vision, this life we wanted and the travel we wanted to do and the camper we wanted to buy and all of those things, then I needed to support his business in those ways as well, emotionally and
Yep.
mentally, allowing him the space to go do it and then come back to a house that when I was at my best there were moments, when I'm like, oh, you're leaving again. But most of the time I could be really supportive.
Alex, do you ever feel like the guinea pig for her work?
No, I never feel like that.
Yeah.
I am, I'm willing to give her my 2 cents if she ever asks, I mean, there's once in a while she'll ask about certain things and, I think them out, do what I can to hopefully give her a good decision.
I think he's a great sounding board for me. And he's also been somebody that grounds me as a person. I have matured through the years. Like I said, I have a lot of abuse in my background. So for me to finally feel safe and grounded with somebody, that was huge for me. And I think even with him, he'd been married twice before. He's my one and only, but I was his third and final. So, it took a little while for him to figure that part out. But I think I'm one of those people that never takes anything for granted because of my background. I feel gratitude every day, that this man was put in my life for a reason. And I don't think there's anything at this point that we couldn't get through. We've been through death of parents and ups and downs. We went through the Great Recession together with a luxury limousine service, where nobody was traveling. We've been through a lot. And just having him here, even though this is now my own business, having him there as a sounding board has been super helpful for me. And he's just always there. And like he said, even when we were evaluating the different businesses on what I was going to go into, he helped me with those pros and cons, like he said, and gave me his 2 cents on what he thought I would be best at. And it weighed, a lot. It meant a lot to me that he took the time to do that.
Yeah. You touched on something I think really beautiful is that, relationships have this way of they can trigger us and be really challenging and bring up our vulnerabilities, and all of those are wounding. And they can also be where we heal a lot of those things, when we're
Yep.
intentional about it. And it's really beautiful. It's one of the things I love about doing relationship work is watching people heal together.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Alex, do you have a group of men that you connect with on a regular basis?
A group of men? Yeah, I've got a whole bunch of buddies. Funny thing is I think I have more female friends than male friends, but the friends that I have that are male, I mean, they're longtime friends. I consider them my brothers. Probably I'm closer with them than my own brother, but we have good relationship with each other. We're able to talk. We call each other anytime. Last night I had a friend of mine, his name's also Alex. We've known each other for 40 years and we're still best of buds. His daughters and my daughter all, played and messed around and stuff. And so, yeah, I think I have a good amount of men friends.
And all different ages
And all
too. Kind of nice. A lot of the younger men that he's connected with through jobs or otherwise, they look up to him as a mentor. And I think that's really beautiful too. They see him as somebody that has been successful in business and in marriage. And, I think that's beautiful to see them, in that role with him. It's a really nice thing to see.
able to bounce things off each other too. And so, it's definitely a good relationship I think I have with my buddies.
And that to be really important. And at this stage, Jen, this is your business, correct? And Alex, are you in what phase of the career are you in right now?
I'm in the fifth time retiring. I can't seem to find time to retire because, again, I'm a workaholic. So I now have something like 4 jobs. Well, not counting the cooking I do at home. So that would be a fifth job. But to me, I find pleasure in going out and doing some work. I meet people. I've built relationships with the jobs that I do now. A couple of them are younger guys that I work with. And like Jen said, I think they appreciate what I bring to the table to help them with their business. And so it's a one hand washes the other in a way.
Absolutely. And so, Jen, with inside your business, you also, so one of the things that we talked about before we hopped on this call was you've got a 30-minute call that you would love to offer our audience if they're resonating with this, if they're working on that leap to launch aspect. Who is the ideal person that you love to talk to or would invite to reach out to you?
Yeah, I would say anybody that's thought about being a business owner before, but didn't really know where to start because we don't know what we don't know. So a lot of people have thought about, what if I did this or what if I did that? But, that's why this experience was created to have a safe space for people to land and just try on some new hats and see what may fit them better or differently than what they have been doing, all these years. A lot of the corporate executives that I work with have been doing the same thing for decades, and they lose their job unexpectedly. And their whole identity was wrapped up in that. So they're like lost. They don't know what they could even do, and right now, just to give you some idea of the job market today is super crowded. And the higher up you are in the organization, the longer it's going to take you to replace that job. So I have corporate executives that have been out of work for 24 months before they find another opportunity. And it's usually for less money and it's usually something they weren't excited, but they take the first job that they were offered because it's been 2 years. And so that's unfortunate that that still happens. So instead of that, let's talk about what else you could do. Let's get curious. Let's see what we could transfer that skill set to. So if you're interested in just doing an intro call to see if this is the right fit for you, I'm going to be your partner. I'm your accountability partner. I'm going to ask all the hard questions. We're going to have some transparent conversations if you're open to that. The people that I love to work with the most are just curious and open to whatever comes their way. What I don't want to do is, encounter somebody that just feels stuck in the same box they've been in for 20, 30 years. I want to give people options. And if business ownership is an option for you, then let's talk about that. Let's explore that, what that could look like. Not everybody's cut out to be a business owner, as I'm sure you've seen it. It takes guts, it takes guts and commitment and flexibility and adaptability, all those things, and not everybody has that in them. Some people are much better off being in a comfortable position, which, again, is not that secure these days, but, they feel more comfortable relying on a steady paycheck than having to go and create something for themselves. But the ones that are willing to make the leap, those are the ones that I want to talk to and fully support. I am that accountability partner. I will walk with you, through this whole journey and make sure that you are where you're supposed to be.
So it takes guts, it takes curiosity, the question of what if, like what is possible. And also what we talked about is it takes a really supportive spouse whenever you're
Absolutely.
taking these things. Because it's going to bring up tension. It's going to bring up tension inside you. And then
Fear.
that person that you're married to or partner to is going to feel that tension. They're going to feel the tension or you're going to feel their tension. It's been 24
Yeah.
months since the last paycheck. Right? And so finding that person, that ride or die who's in it with you together. And Jen, what I love is that you address that at the beginning and you invite that person in on the journey, no
Yep.
matter what role or seat that they want to have on the bus. So
Yep.
that's super important. I've just got one more curiosity. And Jen, I loved it. We saw your coach hat come on a couple times on this call, right? There was like the spouse hat was rocking, and then like Coach Jen's out for a second. Do you ever get inspired to try to coach Alex anymore? No? Did you
No,
ever try that?
I think that, many couples in the beginning try to change who they're with, make them better, bring out the best is what I think the intention is to bring out the best in your spouse. But if you're trying to change who they are, that's not going to work. He is who he is, and I am who I am. And I think that the more rooted we are in who we are, and the more authentic we are with ourselves and with each other and with the people in our lives, the closer the connections are. And I think that's really important, to really think about that, because when you are going into business, you're juggling a lot of things, and you still have to have that ride or die next to you, like you said, that will support you no matter what's going on. If it is, I had a bad day and I need to cry, he's going to listen, but I'm not going to, I have been with other people that are therapists or counselors, and they sometimes will try to fix, things instead of just listening. And sometimes I just need him to listen. Sometimes I just need to listen to him. I don't want to fix the situation. I just want to be there for him, or likewise, him there for me. I think that's a big part of it. When you get so far into a relationship, you realize those things. Stop trying to fix things, just listen. Sometimes that's all you need is somebody to listen to you and really know who you are, really understand where it's coming from, whatever those feelings are.
Beautifully said. All right. I think with that, we'll wrap it up. I feel like that was a beautiful ending. We will put information on how to find Jen if you are interested in doing that call with her and seeing if she's a great fit for you to help you navigate your next steps and transition. Yeah. And we like to end this with a few rapid fire questions. They're supposed to be easy. Some couples have accused us of these being the hardest questions on the podcast, so we'll see what you think. First one is, what do you two call each other? What are your pet names for each other?
Honey.
I'm Honey. He's Babe.
Who makes the bed?
Who makes the bed?
Jen.
He could care less.
Yeah.
Right. How many pillows are
As
on your
long
bed?
as there's a sheet, that's all I need.
How many pillows are on your bed?
4.
Efficient. Love it.
James hates my decorative pillows. Who is the first to apologize after an argument?
I think Jen.
Yeah.
I'm a little more stubborn.
The communication has definitely grown as we've grown as a couple. It used to be early on, when we had any kind of conflict, he would just shut down and get real quiet. And that's how I know something's wrong. We start to feel very disconnected because he'll get real quiet and I know something's going on. But now it's like I can see right away if something's not right, if we're not in alignment on something. We can identify that really early, now and just talk through it. And I think that's definitely a beautiful thing that we've gotten to that point.
It is a beautiful thing. And what's your favorite snack?
Ice cream, strawberries, dark chocolate.
Dark chocolate and nuts.
Oh, yeah, nuts. We've got 6 tons of nuts in the house.
Nice.
At all
You're ready
times.
for
At
the
all
next
times.
pandemic. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you all so much for joining us for the great conversation. We really appreciate it and all that you shared with our audience.
Yeah, and to our lovely audience, we hope you gathered some great nuggets, or at least just one thing that you can walk away with, feel more hopeful, more excited about the future, something that can potentially instantly shift one of the patterns that isn't serving you in your relationship anymore. If this episode resonated with you, please, if you haven't already, we would love it if you left a review. And if this conversation brought somebody to mind, somebody that you love and care about to mind, please share it with them. Literally share the love intentionally. And until the next episode, y'all, may your life and love be magnetic.